Nothing prepares you for the moment when your world shifts beneath your feet. For Kara Dunn, that moment came when she was gently brushing her rescue dog's fur and felt something wrong. Milo had been her constant companion for 3 years. The golden retriever mix had filled the quiet spaces in her home with warmth and unconditional love. So when she discovered tiny holes dotting his back, her heart sank with worry. Any pet owner knows that feeling, the fear that grips you when something threatens the one creature who loves you without question. She rushed into the vet, expecting the usual diagnosis. Fleas, maybe a skin infection, something treatable. But what Dr. Martinez pulled from those wounds changed everything. Small metallic objects, fused with living tissue. The vet's hands trembled as he held them up to the light. His face went pale, but how deep does this conspiracy really go? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Asterisk. Kara Dunn had built her life around understanding people. For 20 years, she had sat across from countless individuals in her quiet therapy practice, helping them navigate the labyrinth of human emotion and memory. Her office, located in a converted Victorian house on Maple Street, reflected her approach to healing: warm, inviting, and utterly safe. The leather-bound journal that sat on her desk contained more than just session notes. It was a repository of human experience, filled with careful observations about patterns of behavior, breakthrough moments, and the subtle ways trauma revealed itself in everyday conversation. Each page represented someone's journey toward wholeness, documented in her precise handwriting that had barely changed since graduate school. At 43, Kara possessed the kind of presence that made people feel heard. Her graying auburn hair was usually pulled back in a practical bun, and she favored comfortable cardigans that made her approachable rather than clinical. Behind wire-rimmed glasses, her green eyes held a quality that her clients often described as deeply attentive, as if she could see through the surface of things to understand what lay beneath. This gift for perception had drawn her to psychology in the first place. Growing up in a household where emotions were rarely discussed openly, she had learned to read the subtle signs: the tightness around her mother's eyes when financial stress mounted, the way her father's shoulders sagged when work disappointments accumulated. These early lessons in observation had shaped her professional life, making her exceptionally skilled at helping others uncover truths they had buried. Her journey to becoming a therapist hadn't been straightforward. After college, she had worked in corporate human resources for several years, but something felt missing. The turning point came when her younger brother Jake struggled with depression following his military service. Traditional therapy hadn't reached him, but their long conversations during family dinners gradually helped him process his experiences. Watching Jake slowly return to himself convinced Kara that she had found her calling. Graduate school had been demanding but rewarding. She specialized in trauma therapy, drawn to helping people who had experienced the kind of profound disruptions that could shatter a person's sense of safety in the world. Her dissertation focused on the ways animals could facilitate emotional healing, a subject that would prove more relevant to her own life than she could have imagined. The practice she eventually established reflected her belief that healing happened best in environments that felt like home rather than hospitals. Her waiting room featured comfortable armchairs, warm lighting, and always fresh flowers. Clients often commented that simply walking into the space made them feel calmer. This was intentional. Kara understood that people revealed their deepest truths only when they felt completely safe. Sarah Coleman, her receptionist and office manager, had been with the practice for 8 years. A retired school administrator with silver hair and a gift for making anyone feel welcome. Sarah managed the complex scheduling and insurance requirements that allowed Kara to focus on what she did best. Their working relationship had evolved into genuine friendship, built on shared values and mutual respect. Dr. Richard Bennett, whose practice occupied the other half of the Victorian house, had become both colleague and confidant over the years. A family therapist with 30 years of experience, Richard possessed a dry wit and remarkable patience that made him excellent at navigating complex family dynamics. Their informal consultations over coffee had helped Kara work through countless challenging cases. The rhythm of Kara's days had settled into comfortable predictability. Morning sessions typically involved her most challenging cases, people dealing with severe trauma or complex family situations who benefited from her full attention and energy. Afternoons were often reserved for maintenance sessions with clients who had made significant progress but still needed regular support. Her therapeutic approach blended traditional talk therapy with newer techniques she had learned through continuing education. She was particularly skilled at helping clients recognize patterns in their relationships and behaviors that stemmed from early experiences. Many of her clients had been with her for years, working through deep-seated issues that required patience and consistent support. Between sessions, she made detailed notes in her journal, not just about symptoms and progress, but about the subtle changes in body language, tone of voice, and emotional expression that revealed how someone was truly doing. These observations often proved crucial in understanding when a client was ready for a breakthrough or needed additional support. The work was emotionally demanding, requiring her to hold space for intense pain while maintaining enough professional distance to remain helpful. Kara had learned to create boundaries that protected her own emotional well-being while still being fully present for her clients. Regular supervision with a senior colleague, meditation practice, and physical exercise helped her process the heavy emotions she encountered daily. Her personal life had deliberately remained simple. A brief marriage in her 30s had ended amicably when both she and her ex-husband realized they wanted different things from life. There had been a few relationships since, but none that felt substantial enough to alter the peaceful existence she had created. Her work fulfilled her in ways that romantic partnerships never quite had. 3 years ago, everything changed when she decided to adopt a dog. The idea had been percolating for months. Many of her clients found comfort in pets, and research supported the therapeutic benefits of animal companionship. When she visited the county animal shelter on a Saturday afternoon, she had no specific breed or age in mind, just a sense that she was ready to share her life with a 4-legged companion. Milo had been sitting quietly in his kennel while other dogs barked and jumped for attention. The shelter volunteer, a young woman named Lisa, explained that he was a 3-year-old golden retriever mix who had been found wandering along a rural highway. No microchip, no identification, no one had claimed him despite extensive outreach efforts. He was gentle, house-trained, and seemed to prefer calm environments to chaotic ones. When Lisa opened the kennel door, Milo approached Kara slowly, his tail wagging tentatively. As she knelt down and extended her hand, he sniffed carefully before pressing his head against her palm. The connection was immediate and profound. This dog needed someone who would appreciate his quiet nature, and she needed a companion who wouldn't disrupt the peaceful life she had built. The adoption process had been straightforward. Lisa was clearly pleased that such a gentle dog was going to someone who understood animal behavior and had the time and resources to provide excellent care. The paperwork took less than an hour, and by evening, Milo was settling into his new home as if he had always belonged there. Their routine developed naturally over the following weeks. Morning walks before her first appointments helped Kara start each day centered and calm. Milo would spend the day resting in her office while she saw clients, his presence somehow making the space even more therapeutic. Many clients commented on how his quiet companionship helped them feel more relaxed during difficult sessions. Evenings belonged to them both. After dinner, they would take longer walks through the neighborhood, Milo investigating interesting scents while Kara unwound from the emotional intensity of her workday. His steady presence filled the quiet spaces in her home without demanding constant attention. He seemed to understand when she needed solitude and when she wanted companionship. The bond between them deepened with each passing month. Milo learned to read her moods with uncanny accuracy, offering comfort when she had particularly difficult days with clients and sharing her contentment during peaceful evening at home. She found herself talking to him about her cases, careful to maintain confidentiality, while still processing the complex emotions that came with her work. On this particular Tuesday morning, Kara was preparing for what promised to be a demanding day. Her first appointment was with Maria Santos, a recent widow struggling with grief and isolation. The second session involved a teenager whose anxiety had become so severe that she was missing significant amounts of school. These were the kinds of cases that required her full attention and emotional availability. As she gathered her materials for the day, she noticed Milo behaving slightly differently than usual. Normally, he would settle into his favorite spot by the window after their morning walk, content to watch the neighborhood wake up. Instead, he seemed restless, moving from room to room and occasionally stopping to stare at corners where nothing was visible. When she called him for his usual pre-work brushing, a routine that helped both of them start the day calmly, he came reluctantly rather than with his typical enthusiasm. As her fingers worked through his golden fur, she felt something that made her pause. Small raised areas dotted his back, each about the size of a grain of rice, arranged in an almost deliberate pattern. At first, she assumed they were insect bites or perhaps a mild skin irritation. But as she examined them more carefully, running her fingers gently over each spot, she realized these weren't typical bumps or swellings. Each raised area seemed to have a tiny hole in the center, as if something had been inserted beneath the skin. The discovery filled her with the kind of immediate concern that every pet owner recognizes, the fear that something serious might be wrong with a beloved animal. Milo stood patiently while she examined him, but she could sense his discomfort. These spots were tender, and he flinched slightly when she pressed too firmly. Dr. Martinez had been Milo's veterinarian since the adoption. Located just 15 minutes from Kara's practice, the East Animal Clinic had earned a reputation for thorough, compassionate care. Dr. Martinez himself was a soft-spoken man in his 50s who had built his practice on the principle that animals deserved the same attention to detail that human patients received. Kara called the clinic immediately, explaining what she had found. Sarah, the receptionist, could hear the worry in her voice and managed to squeeze them in for an appointment that afternoon. The morning sessions would proceed as scheduled, but Kara knew her attention would be divided between her client's needs and concern for Milo. As she drove to work with Milo resting quietly in the passenger seat, Kara found herself running through possible explanations. Parasite bites seemed most likely, though the pattern struck her as unusual. Perhaps he had encountered something during their evening walks that had left these marks. She made a mental note to be more careful about where they walked and what he might investigate. The morning sessions went well despite her distraction. Maria made breakthrough progress in discussing her fears about building a new life without her husband. The anxious teenager, Emma, seemed more relaxed than she had in weeks and actually smiled when discussing a positive interaction with a classmate. These small victories reminded Kara why she loved her work, even as part of her mind remained focused on the afternoon veterinary appointment. When the time came to leave for the clinic, Milo seemed to sense something significant was happening. He remained calm during the car ride, but Kara noticed he was more alert than usual. His ears pricked and his attention focused intently on their surroundings. She attributed this to his general sensitivity to changes in routine. The waiting room at Eastside Animal Clinic was mercifully quiet. An elderly woman sat with an ancient-looking tabby cat, and a young father waited with two children, and what appeared to be a hamster in a small carrier. Milo settled beside Kara's chair, but she noticed he kept turning to look toward the examination rooms, as if he knew what was coming. When Dr. Martinez called them back, his usual warm smile seemed slightly strained. Perhaps he had been having a difficult day, or maybe Kara was projecting her own anxiety onto his expression. The examination room was familiar. They had been here for Milo's annual checkups and a minor ear infection the previous year. So what seems to be the problem? Today? Dr. Martinez asked as he began his initial examination of Milo. Kara explained about the small bumps and holes she had discovered, pointing out each location as Dr. Martinez carefully palpated Milo's back. His expression grew increasingly serious as he examined each spot, and she noticed his hands pause longer than usual at several locations. Has Milo been behaving differently lately? The veterinarian asked, his voice carefully neutral. A little restless this morning, but nothing dramatic, Kara replied. Is this something serious? Dr. Martinez didn't answer immediately. Instead, he continued his examination, paying particular attention to the areas Kara had identified. When he finally spoke, his words would change everything she thought she knew about her quiet, peaceful life. I'm going to need to take a closer look at these lesions, he said, his professional calm not quite masking an underlying tension. This may take a few minutes. As he prepared his instruments, Kara noticed something in his demeanor that her years of reading people immediately flagged as significant. Dr. Martinez was worried about something beyond standard veterinary concerns. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, but there was an alertness in his posture that suggested this examination was far from routine. The next morning, Kara found herself unable to concentrate on her case notes. Sleep had come in fragments, interrupted by images of Dr. Martinez's pale face and the strange, metallic objects he had extracted from Milo's back. She had left the clinic with more questions than answers, and the veterinarian's obvious discomfort suggested there was far more to this situation than a simple medical anomaly. By 9 o'clock, she had canceled her morning appointments and was driving back to the Eastside Animal Clinic. Milo rode beside her, seeming more like his usual self after the removal procedure, but Kara's trained instincts told her that something fundamental had shifted in her world. Dr. Martinez looked surprised when Sarah announced her arrival. He emerged from an examination room looking harried, his usually immaculate white coat wrinkled as if he had been running his hands through his hair. When he saw Kara waiting with Milo, his expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Is everything all right? Is Milo having complications from yesterday's procedure? He asked, but his tone suggested he already suspected her visit wasn't about routine follow-up care. I need to know what those objects really were, Kara said directly. Her years of therapeutic training had taught her that sometimes the most important conversations required cutting through politeness to reach truth. Your reaction yesterday told me this wasn't the first time you've seen something like this. Dr. Martinez glanced around the waiting room, noting the presence of other clients and staff. Perhaps we should discuss this in my office, he said, quietly, leading them away from the main clinic area. His private office was small and cluttered, filled with veterinary journals, continuing education certificates, and family photos. But as he closed the door behind them, Kara noticed something she had missed in previous visits. A locked filing cabinet that looked far more secure than typical veterinary records would require. Dr. Martinez, I've spent 20 years learning to read people, Kara said as they settled into chairs. I know when someone is frightened, and I know when someone is hiding something important. What aren't you telling me about what you found in Milo? The veterinarian sat quietly for a long moment, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone who had been carrying a burden alone for too long. Those weren't parasites or any kind of natural formation, he admitted. They were technological devices, tiny transmitters fused with organic tissue in a way I've never seen before. Kara felt her breath catch. Transmitters? What do you mean? Dr. Martinez moved to the locked filing cabinet, retrieving a key from his desk drawer. I've been documenting cases like this for 18 months, he said, opening the cabinet to reveal dozens of files. Dogs, cats, even some birds, all with similar implants, all with owners who fit certain demographic profiles. He pulled out a thick folder and spread its contents across his desk. Photographs of X-rays, microscopic images of the metallic devices, and detailed notes filled the documents. As Kara studied the materials, a chill ran down her spine. How many animals? She asked. In this area alone? 47 confirmed cases. Probably more that haven't been discovered yet. Dr. Martinez's voice grew quieter. The patterns are too consistent to be coincidental. Professional people, often in healthcare or education, living alone or in small households, usually with rescue animals adopted from specific shelters. Kara looked up sharply. Specific shelters? You mean the county animal shelter where you adopted Milo has provided animals for 32 of these cases, he confirmed. Always dogs or cats with no prior history, no microchips, no way to trace their origins. The implications hit her like a physical blow. Milo's mysterious background, his perfect temperament, the way he had seemed almost too good to be true. Suddenly, these positive qualities took on a sinister cast. Who's behind this? She asked, though part of her dreaded the answer. Dr. Martinez hesitated before pulling out another file, this one marked with a red tab. I've traced some of the device components. The technology appears to be military-grade sophisticated, enough to transmit biological data in real time. Heart rate, stress hormones, brainwave patterns, even location tracking. He showed her technical specifications that meant nothing to her untrained eye, but the implications were clear. These animals are being used as monitoring devices, he continued. But for what purpose? I'm not entirely sure. Why haven't you reported this to authorities? Kara asked, though even as she spoke, she suspected the answer would be complicated. I tried, Dr. Martinez said, his expression grim. 6 months ago, I contacted the State Veterinary Board, the local police, even the FBI. Within a week, I received visits from people claiming to be federal investigators who told me this was part of an ongoing national security operation. They warned me that interfering could be considered obstruction of justice. He pulled out a business card from the file, plain white, with only a phone number and the name Agent Thompson. They said if I discovered any more cases, I should report them through this contact only. No other agencies, no public discussion, no documentation beyond what was absolutely necessary for animal health. Kara studied the card, memorizing the phone number. But you kept documenting anyway. I'm a veterinarian, Dr. Martinez said simply. My oath is to protect animals, and these procedures are being done without informed consent from the owners. That's unconscionable, regardless of who's ordering it. As they talked, Kara found herself thinking about the patterns Dr. Martinez had identified. Professional people in healthcare or education that certainly described her. Living alone with a rescue animal, another match. The profile seemed designed to identify individuals who might be particularly trustworthy or influential within their communities. Dr. Martinez, these people you've been reporting to, have they ever explained what data they're collecting or why? They claim it's related to monitoring potential bioterrorism threats, he said. Something about tracking unusual disease patterns through animal hosts. But the technology goes far beyond simple health monitoring. He showed her a detailed analysis he had conducted on one of the extracted devices. These transmitters can detect and record a wide range of physiological and neurological data. They're not just monitoring the animals. They're monitoring the humans the animals live with. The full scope of the violation began to dawn on Kara. For 3 years, every moment of her private life had potentially been recorded and transmitted to unknown recipients. Her stress levels during difficult therapy sessions, her sleep patterns, her emotional responses to daily events, all of it could have been captured through her beloved companion. "What about the animals themselves?" she asked. "Are they being harmed by these devices?" "That's what worries me most," Dr. Martinez admitted. "The implants seem to be affecting their behavior in subtle ways. Increased alertness, changes in sleep patterns, sometimes heightened responses to sounds or movements that wouldn't normally concern them." Kara thought about Milo's restlessness the previous morning, his unusual alertness during the car ride to the clinic. Is it possible that devices are transmitting signals to the animals as well as from them? "I believe so," Dr. Martinez said grimly. "The technology appears designed for two-way communication. These animals might be receiving instructions or stimuli that influence their behavior." The conversation was interrupted by a knock on the office door. Dr. Martinez's receptionist peered in apologetically. "Doctor, there's a man here asking about yesterday's procedure on Milo. He says he's from animal control, but he doesn't have the usual identification." Kara and Dr. Martinez exchanged glances. "Tell him I'll be right out," the veterinarian said, but his expression had grown tense. "Dr. Martinez," Kara said quickly, "I need copies of everything you've shown me. And I need to know, are there other pet owners who figured out what's happening?" He hesitated, then pulled out a single sheet of paper with 3 names and phone numbers written in his careful handwriting. "These people have asked the same questions you're asking. But be careful, 2 of them reported being followed after they started investigating." As Kara memorized the contact information, Dr. Martinez quickly made copies of the most important documents from his files. The sound of voices in the outer office grew more insistent, and they both realized their time was running short. "Take the back exit," he said, handing her a folder containing copies of his research. "And Kara, trust no one completely. This goes deeper than either of us understands." As she led Milo toward the rear door of the clinic, Kara's mind raced through the implications of what she had learned. Her quiet, predictable life had been built on an illusion of privacy and safety that had been shattered in less than 24 hours. The drive home felt different now. Every car that followed the same routes seemed potentially suspicious. Every person who glanced in their direction might be part of the surveillance network she was only beginning to comprehend. When they reached her house, Kara noticed something that made her blood run cold. A plain sedan was parked across the street, occupied by a single figure who appeared to be reading a newspaper. As she pulled into her driveway, the figure lowered the paper slightly, revealing enough of his face for her to see that his attention was focused entirely on her front door. That evening, as she sat in her living room with Dr. Martinez's files spread across her coffee table, Kara made a decision that would change everything. She was going to find out exactly what had been done to Milo, who was responsible, and why she had been targeted. The first step would be contacting the other pet owners Dr. Martinez had identified. If this conspiracy was as extensive as the evidence suggested, she wouldn't be able to face it alone, as if sensing her resolve. Milo moved from his usual spot by the window to sit directly beside her chair, his warm presence a reminder of what she was fighting to protect. Whatever these people had done to him, whatever violation they had inflicted on both of them, she would find a way to expose the truth. The war for her privacy and peace of mind was just beginning. The surveillance had become impossible to ignore. Over the next week, Kara documented 3 different vehicles that appeared outside her home at various times, always with single occupants who seemed more interested in her house than in any legitimate business in the neighborhood. The sedan from that first evening had been replaced by a dark SUV, then a nondescript van, as if her watchers were rotating their equipment to avoid detection. More disturbing were the subtle changes in her daily routine that she hadn't initially connected to the discovery at the veterinary clinic. Her internet service had experienced several brief outages, always during evening hours when she typically worked on case notes or personal research. Her home phone had developed an odd echo that made conversations feel slightly delayed. Even her mail delivery seemed altered, letters arriving a day later than usual, as if they were being intercepted and examined before reaching her mailbox. The paranoia felt foreign and uncomfortable. Kara had built her professional life on helping others distinguish between legitimate concerns and anxiety-driven fears. Now she found herself questioning every coincidence, every minor deviation from normal patterns. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was experiencing the kind of hypervigilance she typically helped clients overcome. On Thursday morning, her concerns about surveillance were overshadowed by an unexpected development in her practice. Sarah announced that a new client had requested an emergency appointment. A veteran named Marcus Webb, who claimed to be experiencing severe PTSD symptoms related to his recent deployment overseas, thought emergency appointments were unusual but not unprecedented. Kara maintained several slots each week for crisis situations, understanding that mental health emergencies couldn't always wait for convenient scheduling. When Marcus Webb arrived precisely on time for his 11 o'clock appointment, her initial impression was of someone carrying invisible burdens. He appeared to be in his early 30s, with the kind of controlled posture that suggested military training. His handshake was firm but brief, and his eyes moved constantly around the office, cataloging exits and potential threats in a way that seemed automatic rather than conscious. These were behaviors Kara recognized from other veterans she had treated, hypervigilance born of experiences where awareness could mean survival. "Mr. Webb, thank you for coming in," Kara said as they settled into their usual seating arrangement. "Sarah mentioned you're dealing with some urgent concerns related to your military service." "Marcus, please," he said, his voice carefully modulated. "I completed my discharge processing 3 weeks ago. Army Rangers, 2 deployments to Afghanistan. The transition back to civilian life has been challenging." As he spoke, Kara found herself applying the same analytical skills she had developed over 20 years of practice. Something about Marcus's presentation didn't align with her extensive experience treating combat veterans. His symptoms were textbook perfect, almost too consistent with classic PTSD presentations. "Can you tell me about the specific symptoms you're experiencing?" she asked, pulling out her leather-bound journal to take notes. "Sleep disturbances, intrusive memories, difficulty concentrating," Marcus recited. "I've been having flashbacks to a particular incident during my 2nd deployment. An improvised explosive device that killed 2 members of my unit." The details he provided were vivid and emotionally appropriate, but something in his delivery troubled Kara. Veterans describing traumatic events typically showed physiological responses, changes in breathing, involuntary muscle tension, difficulty maintaining eye contact. Marcus exhibited none of these natural reactions. "Marcus, I notice you're quite composed while discussing these difficult memories," Kara observed gently. Many veterans find it challenging to talk about traumatic events without experiencing some physical or emotional responses. "I've been working on compartmentalization techniques," he replied smoothly. "My unit received training on managing stress responses in high-pressure situations." As the session continued, Kara's professional instincts sharpened. Marcus's military history contained small inconsistencies, references to equipment that didn't match standard Army Ranger loadouts, mentions of deployment locations that seemed geographically imprecise. Most telling was his body language, which remained remarkably controlled throughout their conversation. After the session ended, Marcus scheduled a follow-up appointment for the following week. Kara immediately turned to her computer to verify his background information. The address he had provided existed, but when she cross-referenced it with public records, she discovered the property had been vacant for 6 months. Her investigation deepened when she called. The phone number Marcus had listed. The call went to a generic voicemail system with no personalized greeting, unusual for someone seeking mental health treatment, which typically required accessible communication. That afternoon, during her consultation coffee with Dr. Bennett, Kara decided to share her concerns about the new client. Richard had been practicing family therapy for 3 decades and had extensive experience working with military families. "Richard, have you noticed anything unusual about your referral patterns lately?" Kara asked as they settled into their usual corner table at the cafe down the street from their practice. "Unusual how?" he asked, stirring honey into his tea with the deliberate motions of someone who had perfected this ritual over many years. "I've had several new clients in recent weeks, all with military backgrounds," Kara explained carefully. "The referral sources are varied, but there's something about their presentations that feels orchestrated." Richard's expression grew thoughtful. "Now that you mention it, I've had 3 new clients in the past month, all claiming service-related family issues, but their stories don't quite ring true when I dig into the details." They spent the next hour comparing notes about their respective new clients. The pattern that emerged was disturbing in its consistency. Individuals claiming military service, presenting with symptoms that matched textbook descriptions, but lacked the authentic emotional markers both therapists had learned to recognize. "Richard, what if these aren't genuine clients seeking treatment?" Kara asked quietly. "What if they're here for some other purpose?" "You mean surveillance?" he said, lowering his voice. "That seems rather paranoid, doesn't it?" Kara thought about the files Dr. Martinez had shown her, the sophisticated technology that had been implanted in Milo, the surveillance vehicles outside her home. "I'm beginning to think paranoia might be an appropriate response to our current situation." When she returned to her office, Kara found Sarah reviewing the afternoon's appointment schedule. "Did Marcus Webb mention how he heard about our practice?" Kara asked. "He said he was referred by his discharge counselor at the VA hospital," Sarah replied. "But when I tried to verify his insurance information, there were some discrepancies in his veterans benefits documentation." That evening, Kara made a decision that went against every instinct for caution that the past week had instilled. She called the first number on Dr. Martinez's list, a woman named Jennifer Hayes, who had also discovered anomalies in her pet's health. Jennifer answered on the second ring, her voice immediately wary when Kara identified herself as another pet owner, with questions about unusual veterinary findings. "Dr. Martinez gave you my number?" Jennifer asked carefully. "Yes, he said you might have insights about some medical anomalies," Kara replied, choosing her words with equal care. "Can you meet somewhere public tomorrow evening?" Jennifer asked. "Somewhere with good lighting and multiple exits." They arranged to meet at a busy restaurant downtown, far from both of their usual neighborhoods. As Kara ended the call, she realized that Jennifer's caution about meeting locations suggested this conspiracy had already touched more lives than she had imagined. That night, as she prepared for bed, Kara noticed Milo exhibiting behaviors she had never seen before. He positioned himself near the front window and remained there for hours, alert and watchful, as if he were standing guard. When she called him to come upstairs, he hesitated, something he had never done in 3 years of living with her. The thought that Milo's implants might still be affecting his behavior, even after their removal, filled her with a mixture of anger and heartbreak. Whatever these people had done to him, whatever purpose they had intended him to serve, the violation felt deeply personal. As she finally drifted off to sleep, Kara's last conscious thought was a resolution that surprised her with its intensity. She was going to find out exactly who was responsible for this conspiracy, and she was going to make them pay for what they had done to innocent animals and their trusting owners. The quiet therapist, who had spent her career helping others heal, was discovering a capacity for righteous anger that would prove more powerful than her enemies had anticipated. The meeting with Jennifer Hayes took place at Lucia's Italian restaurant, a family-owned establishment downtown that had been serving the community for 40 years. Kara arrived early, choosing a corner table that offered clear sightlines to both entrances while remaining partially concealed behind a decorative room divider. The paranoid calculation of such positioning would have seemed absurd to her just 2 weeks earlier. Jennifer appeared at exactly 7 o'clock, scanning the restaurant with the same careful assessment Kara had made. She was a woman in her late 40s with prematurely gray hair and the kind of alert, intelligent eyes that suggested a background in technical or analytical work. When she spotted Kara, her expression combined relief with continued wariness. "Dr. Dunn?" she asked as she approached the table, extending her hand for a brief, businesslike handshake. "Please, call me Kara. Thank you for agreeing to meet." As Jennifer settled into the chair across from her, Kara noticed the woman's movements had a nervous efficiency that spoke of someone who had been living under stress for an extended period. Her clothing was nondescript but professional, and she carried a small messenger bag that she kept positioned for quick access. "Before we begin," Jennifer said quietly, "I need you to understand that talking about this puts both of us at risk. Are you certain you want to know what I'm going to tell you?" The question hung between them for a moment. Kara thought about her peaceful life from just 2 weeks ago, the comfortable routine of her therapy practice, the simple pleasure of evening walks with Milo. All of that was already gone, shattered by the discovery of metallic implants and the realization that her privacy had been violated for years. "I'm certain," Kara said firmly. "Whatever's happening, it's already destroyed any sense of safety I had. I need to understand what I'm dealing with." Jennifer nodded, reaching into her messenger bag to retrieve what appeared to be a standard USB drive. "This contains fragments of classified documentation about something called Project Canine Bridge," she said, sliding the device across the table. "I worked for a defense contractor until 18 months ago. When I discovered what the project really involved, I tried to expose it through proper channels." "What happened?" Kara asked, closing her fingers around the USB drive. "My concerns were dismissed as paranoid delusions. I was subjected to psychological evaluation, placed on administrative leave, and eventually terminated for security violations." Jennifer's voice carried the bitter edge of someone who had learned painful lessons about institutional loyalty. 6 months later, my cat Whiskers developed the same strange symptoms your dog experienced. As they ordered dinner to maintain the appearance of a normal social meeting, Jennifer explained her background. She had been a systems analyst for Meridian Defense Solutions, a mid-sized contractor specializing in surveillance and communication technologies for military applications. Her security clearance had given her access to project documentation that most employees never saw. Project Canine Bridge started as research into using therapy animals for treating PTSD in veterans. Jennifer continued once their server had moved away. The initial phase involved studying how emotional bonds between humans and animals could be leveraged for therapeutic purposes. "That sounds legitimate," Kara said, though she suspected the story was about to take a darker turn. "It was, initially," Jennifer agreed. "But somewhere during the second year, the project scope expanded dramatically. Instead of just studying human-animal bonds, they began developing technology to manipulate those bonds for intelligence-gathering purposes." Jennifer explained that the implants Kara had discovered were far more sophisticated than simple tracking devices. They were designed to monitor not just the animal's physiological responses, but also the emotional and psychological states of their human companions. The technology could detect stress patterns, sleep cycles, social interactions, and even changes in routine that might indicate shifts in behavior or mental state. The animals become unwitting surveillance platforms, Jennifer said, her voice heavy with disgust. Every pet owner selected for the program is monitored 24 hours a day through their beloved companion. But why therapists and healthcare workers? Kara asked. What makes us particularly valuable targets? Think about it, Jennifer replied. Therapists have access to confidential information about dozens of people. Healthcare workers interact with vulnerable populations. Teachers influence young minds. The intelligence value of monitoring people in these professions is enormous. As Jennifer spoke, Kara began to understand the true scope of what they were facing. This wasn't just about privacy violation. It was about systematic infiltration of professions that required absolute trust. The implications for her clients, for the therapeutic process itself, were staggering. There's more, Jennifer continued, glancing around the restaurant to ensure they weren't being overheard. The technology isn't just for monitoring. The implants can transmit signals that influence the animal's behavior, which in turn affects their human companions. What kind of influence? Kara asked, though she was beginning to suspect she already knew the answer. Subtle behavioral modifications that can alter mood, sleep patterns, stress responses, Jennifer explained. If you want someone to be more anxious or more compliant, you can program their pet to exhibit behaviors that trigger those responses. Most people would never suspect their emotional state was being manipulated through their animal companion. The revelation hit Kara like a physical blow. She thought about the nights when Milo's restlessness had kept her awake, the mornings when his unusual energy had left her feeling unsettled, the subtle ways his behavior might have influenced her own emotional state over the past 3 years. Jennifer, how many people are involved in this program? The documents I accessed suggested initial deployment to several hundred subjects across multiple metropolitan areas, Jennifer said grimly, but that was 18 months ago. The program was designed for rapid expansion once the technology proved effective. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of their dinner, forcing them to pause while the server arranged their plates and refilled their water glasses. Kara noticed that Jennifer waited until the young man was completely out of earshot before continuing. The USB drive contains everything I was able to copy before my access was terminated, Jennifer said quietly. Technical specifications subject. Selection criteria, monitoring protocols, and partial lists of participating veterinary clinics and animal shelters. Dr. Martinez mentioned that many of the affected animals came from specific shelters, Kara said. The shelters are recruitment centers, Jennifer confirmed. They've been infiltrated by program personnel who identify suitable animals and prepare them for placement with pre-selected targets. The adoption process is carefully managed to ensure the right animals end up with the right people. As they ate, Jennifer shared more details about how the program operated. The animals underwent surgical implantation at specialized facilities, disguised as routine veterinary clinics. The implants were designed to integrate with living tissue, making them virtually undetectable during normal medical examinations. Only veterinarians specifically trained in the technology could identify and safely remove the devices. Dr. Martinez has been documenting cases and removing implants for over a year, Kara said. He's taken considerable personal risk to help. The animals. There are others like him, Jennifer replied. Veterinarians, shelter workers, even some pet store employees who've discovered pieces of the program and chosen to resist rather than comply. Is there any way to stop this? Kara asked. Some authority we can appeal to? Some legal avenue that might shut down the program? Jennifer's expression grew even more grim. I tried every official channel I could think of. Congressional representatives, inspector generals, whistleblower protection agencies. The program has support at levels high enough to neutralize most conventional oversight mechanisms. So what options do we have? Documentation and exposure, Jennifer said firmly. If we can gather enough evidence and present it in a way that can't be suppressed or discredited, public pressure might force accountability. As they finished their meal, Jennifer provided Kara with additional contacts, other affected pet owners, sympathetic veterinarians, and former contractor employees who had discovered pieces of the conspiracy. The network of resistance was smaller than Kara had hoped, but more extensive than she had feared. One more thing, Jennifer said as they prepared to leave. Be very careful about who you trust, even among the people I've mentioned. The program has been known to use double agents, people who appear to be helping victims but are actually gathering intelligence for the conspirators. They left the restaurant separately, with Jennifer departing first through the front entrance, while Kara waited 10 minutes before exiting through the rear door that led to the parking garage. The precautions felt both necessary and surreal, like scenes from a spy thriller rather than the reality of a small-town therapist's life. During the drive home, Kara found herself constantly checking her rearview mirror for signs of surveillance. The USB drive in her purse felt like it weighed 10 pounds, its contents representing both hope for understanding and potential danger if discovered by the wrong people. When she finally reached her house, Kara noticed that Milo greeted her differently than usual. Instead of his typical enthusiastic welcome, he approached cautiously, sniffing carefully at her clothing and hands. For a moment, she wondered if the removal of his implants had somehow altered his ability to recognize her scent or emotional state. Then she realized the truth was likely more disturbing. For 3 years, Milo's responses to her had been influenced by technological manipulation. Now that the implants were gone, they were both learning who they really were without the artificial influence that had shaped their relationship. As she settled into her home office to examine the contents of Jennifer's USB drive, Kara felt a mixture of determination and dread. She was about to learn the full scope of the conspiracy that had violated her life, but she suspected that knowledge would irrevocably change everything she thought she understood about privacy, trust, and the nature of the institutions she had always believed were designed to protect people like her. The encrypted files on the drive would reveal a reality far more extensive and sinister than anything she had yet imagined. The encrypted files on Jennifer's USB drive required specialized software to access. But Kara's friend David Chun, a computer security consultant who had helped her set up her practice's data protection systems, agreed to assist without asking too many questions. They met at his home office on Saturday morning, away from both of their usual professional environments. David was a quiet man in his 40s who had built his reputation on discretion and technical expertise. When Kara explained that she needed help accessing files related to potential privacy violations, his expression grew serious, but he didn't press for details beyond what he needed to provide assistance. These files are using military-grade encryption, David observed as his specialized software worked through the security layers. Whatever's on here, someone really didn't want it to be easily accessible. When the encryption finally yielded, revealing dozens of documents and technical schematics, Kara felt her breath catch. The scope of Project Canine Bridge was far more extensive than even Jennifer had indicated. The main project blueprint laid out a systematic approach to behavioral influence that was both sophisticated and chilling. The implants didn't just monitor the animals. They created what the documents called neural feedback loops between pets and their owners. The technology could detect when a human was experiencing specific emotional states and then trigger corresponding behaviors in their animal companion. David, look at this schematic, Kara said, pointing to a technical diagram that showed the implant's internal structure. It's not just a transmitter, it's a complete communication system. The device contained components for receiving external signals processing data from the animal's nervous system and transmitting information to remote monitoring stations. Most disturbing was a section labeled Behavioral Modification Protocols. That detailed how the implants could stimulate specific neural pathways in the animals to induce desired responses. According to this, David said, studying the technical specifications, these implants can essentially remote control the animals' emotional and behavioral responses. They can make a calm dog anxious or an energetic dog lethargic, depending on what effect they want to achieve in the human. As they continued reviewing the documents, Kara discovered that her own psychological profile was included in the files. The level of detail was staggering: her educational background, professional specializations, personal relationships, even her decision to adopt a pet after her divorce. Everything about her life had been analyzed and cataloged as part of the subject selection process. "They've been studying me for years," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "long before I ever adopted Milo." The file indicated that she had been identified as a high-value target due to her position as a trauma therapist with access to sensitive client information. The document noted her emotional vulnerability following divorce and her documented interest in animal-assisted therapy as factors that made her particularly suitable for the program. David looked up from his computer screen, his expression troubled. "Kara, there are hundreds of profiles like yours in here. Teachers, healthcare workers, government employees, even some journalists and lawyers. This isn't just surveillance, it's systematic infiltration of professional communities." They discovered that the project had multiple phases planned over several years. Phase 1 involved placing implanted animals with selected targets and establishing baseline monitoring. Phase 2 would expand the program to include behavioral modification experiments. Phase 3, which appeared to still be in development, involved using the network of compromised individuals for what the documents termed influence operations. What did they mean by influence operations? Kara asked, though she was beginning to suspect the answer would be deeply unsettling. David scrolled through related files until he found a document titled Operational Applications. The contents outlined how the program could be used to manipulate decision-making among key professional groups. Therapists could be influenced to recommend specific treatments or medications. Teachers could be guided toward certain educational approaches. Healthcare workers could be nudged to support particular medical protocols. "It's a form of psychological warfare," David said grimly. "They're using people's love for their pets to control their professional judgment and personal decisions." As they continued examining the files, Kara realized that her own therapeutic work might have been compromised for years. Decisions about client treatment, insights during sessions, even her emotional responses to difficult cases, all of it could have been influenced by Milo's program behaviors. The thought that her clients might have suffered because her judgment was artificially altered filled her with a rage she had never experienced before. These people had not only violated her privacy and autonomy, they had potentially compromised her ability to help the vulnerable individuals who trusted her with their healing. "David, can you help me copy all of this onto secure storage devices?" Kara asked. "And can you teach me how to encrypt files so they can't be easily accessed if they're discovered?" "Of course," he replied, already reaching for additional hardware. "But Kara, if this information is accurate, you're dealing with people who have significant resources and government connections. You need to be extremely careful about how you proceed." As they worked to secure copies of the Project Canine Bridge files, Kara thought about the network of resistance that Jennifer had described. If there were others fighting this conspiracy, they would need access to this technical documentation to understand what they were truly facing. "There's something else you should know," David said as they finished the copying process. "These files contain references to real-time monitoring stations. If the implants are still active, the people Running this program probably know that these devices have been removed from your dog. The implication hit Kara immediately. You mean they know that I know? It's very likely, David confirmed. Which means your investigation is probably being monitored as closely as your daily life was. That afternoon, after securing the carpet, files in a safety deposit box at a bank across town, Kara returned home to find evidence that her house had been searched. The intrusion was subtle but slightly out of place. Papers reorganized in ways that suggested professional examination. Even her computer mouse positioned differently than she habitually left it. Milo seemed agitated by the lingering sense of strangers in their home. Without his implants influencing his behavior, his natural protective instincts were more apparent. He moved through the house systematically, sniffing at areas where intruders had spent time, his hackles raised in a way Kara had never seen before. The violation of her home space felt almost worse than learning about the years of surveillance. Her house had been her sanctuary, the one place where she could be completely herself without professional obligations or social expectations. Now even that basic sense of security was gone. As evening approached, Kara made a decision that would have seemed impossible just weeks earlier. She packed essential belongings and prepared to leave her home indefinitely. If the conspirators knew about her investigation, staying in a predictable location would make her an easy target for whatever they planned to do next. Before leaving, she called Dr. Martinez to warn him that their investigation might have been discovered. His phone went directly to voicemail, unusual for a veterinarian, who typically maintained availability for emergency calls. The drive to a hotel in a neighboring town gave Kara time to process everything she had learned from the project. Canine Bridge files. The conspiracy was far more extensive and sophisticated than she had imagined, but it was also more vulnerable than its architects probably realized. The detailed documentation Jennifer had provided contained names, locations, technical specifications, and operational procedures that could expose the entire program if presented to the right people in the right way. The challenge would be finding those people and staying alive long enough to tell the story. As she checked into a modest hotel under a false name, paying cash to avoid creating an electronic trail, Kara realized that her life as a quiet suburban therapist was over. She was now a fugitive from a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of government, armed with information that could bring down a program that had violated the privacy and autonomy of hundreds of innocent people. The woman who had spent her career helping others heal was about to discover whether she had the courage to fight a war against institutions far more powerful than anything she had ever faced. The hotel room became Kara's temporary command center as she worked through the deeper layers of Jennifer's encrypted files. What she discovered in the archived surveillance footage made her question everything she thought she knew about the timeline of her involvement in Project Canine Bridge. The grainy videos, dated 3 years earlier, showed laboratory settings with multiple animals in various stages of the implantation process. But what made Kara's blood run cold was the appearance of several researchers, whose faces she recognized from her recent experiences. Marcus Webb, the supposed PTSD patient who had seemed too perfectly textbook in his presentation, appeared in multiple videos as Dr. Marcus Webb, lead behavioral analyst for the project. The man who had sat in her office claiming trauma from overseas deployment was actually one of the architects of the conspiracy that had targeted her. Even more disturbing was footage showing Dr. Martinez not as a reluctant participant documenting cases against his will, but as an active collaborator in the early stages of the program. The video showed him performing implant procedures on animals that would later be placed with unsuspecting adopters. "He played me," Kara whispered to herself as she watched Dr. Martinez calmly inserting devices into a golden retriever that looked remarkably similar to Milo. "He's been part of this from the beginning." The realization that her trusted veterinarian had been a conspirator rather than an ally, left her feeling isolated and betrayed in ways she hadn't expected. If Dr. Martinez could convincingly play the role of a reluctant whistleblower, how many other people in her life might be part of the deception? The surveillance footage revealed the disturbing origins of Project Canine Bridge in what appeared to be legitimate research into animal-assisted therapy for veterans. Early videos showed researchers working with therapy dogs in clinical settings, documenting the positive effects of human-animal bonding on patients with PTSD and depression. But somewhere during the second year of documented footage, the research took a darker turn. Instead of simply studying natural therapeutic relationships, the scientists began experimenting with technological enhancement of the human-animal bond. The implants started as simple monitoring devices but evolved into sophisticated behavior modification systems. Kara recognized some of the test subjects in the later videos, veterans who believed they were participating in experimental therapy programs. Their interactions with the implanted animals were recorded and analyzed in detail, with researchers noting how changes in the animals' behavior affected their human companions. Emotional states. The progression from therapeutic research to covert surveillance program was documented in chilling detail. Project directors realized that the technology could be used to monitor and influence anyone who formed strong emotional bonds with animals, not just veterans seeking treatment, but ordinary citizens whose professional positions or personal circumstances made them valuable intelligence targets. As she continued reviewing the footage, Kara found videos that documented the infiltration of animal shelters and veterinary clinics across multiple states. The program had systematically placed operatives in positions where they could control the adoption process, ensuring that pre-prepared animals reached their intended targets. The county animal shelter, where she had adopted Milo, appeared in several videos. Lisa, the volunteer who had helped with Milo's adoption, was shown in meetings with project coordinators, discussing Kara's psychological profile and the specific behavioral characteristics they wanted in her assigned animal. Even the adoption was theater, Kara realized, her anger growing stronger with each revelation. Every moment of what I thought was genuine connection was carefully orchestrated. The technical footage showed the sophistication of the implant technology in disturbing detail. The devices were far more advanced than the simple transmitters Dr. Martinez had described. They contained neural interface components that could monitor and influence brain activity in real time, essentially turning beloved pets into remote-controlled surveillance and manipulation platforms. What made the violation even more personal was discovering that Milo had been bred specifically for placement with her. The video showed him as a puppy in a specialized facility, undergoing behavioral conditioning designed to make him particularly appealing to someone with her psychological profile. His gentle nature, his perfect temperament, even his apparent rescue background, everything about him had been artificially created. The laboratory footage also revealed the human cost of the program's development. Several animals had died during early implant procedures, and others suffered lasting neurological damage from the experimental technology. The researchers documented these casualties with clinical detachment, treating the animals as expendable components in their surveillance system. Among the most disturbing discoveries were videos showing the program's expansion beyond individual monitoring. Recent footage documented experiments in collective behavior modification, where multiple implanted animals in the same geographic area were coordinated to influence their owners simultaneously. The technology could potentially manipulate entire professional communities or neighborhood groups. Kara found evidence that her own therapy practice had been specifically targeted as part of a broader operation to monitor and influence mental health professionals throughout the region. Other therapists, social workers, and counselors had been assigned implanted animals through what appeared to be a coordinated placement program. The realization that her colleagues might also be victims or Unknowing participants in the conspiracy added another layer of complexity to her situation. She couldn't trust anyone in her professional network without first determining whether they were also being monitored or manipulated. As she worked through the night, analyzing the extensive documentation Jennifer had provided, Kara began to understand the true scope of what she was facing. Project Canine Bridge wasn't just a surveillance program. It was a systematic assault on the autonomy and privacy of people whose professions required absolute trust. The program had identified that professionals in healthcare, education, and social services wielded influence that could be leveraged for intelligence gathering and social manipulation. By compromising these individuals through their emotional bonds with animals, the conspirators had created a network of unwitting assets. Throughout American society, the technical specifications showed that the program was designed for massive scalability. The implant technology could be mass-produced and deployed through existing veterinary and shelter networks with minimal risk of detection. Within a few years, hundreds of thousands of Americans could be under covert surveillance through their beloved pets. But the documentation also revealed potential vulnerabilities in the conspiracy. The program required extensive coordination between multiple agencies, contractors, and field operatives. The complex technical infrastructure needed constant maintenance and monitoring. Most importantly, the entire operation depended on maintaining secrecy. Exposure would likely lead to immediate shutdown and congressional investigation. As dawn approached, Kara realized she had discovered something the conspirators probably didn't know. She possessed evidence that could expose not just the existence of Project Canine Bridge, but its entire operational structure, technical capabilities, and human cost. The question now was how to use this information effectively. The program had demonstrated its ability to neutralize conventional oversight mechanisms and silence individual whistleblowers. But the sheer scope of the evidence Jennifer had compiled might be powerful enough to overcome even sophisticated suppression efforts. Jennifer had risked everything to preserve this documentation, and now Kara understood why. The archived footage and technical files didn't just prove that the program existed. They provided a roadmap for dismantling it completely. The quiet therapist who had stumbled onto this conspiracy by accident was about to become the most dangerous threat the program had ever faced. Armed with comprehensive evidence and motivated by righteous anger at the violation of everything she held sacred, Kara was ready to declare war on the people who had turned innocent animals into weapons against their own companions. The confrontation with Marcus Webb came sooner than Kara had expected. She was leaving the hotel restaurant after a solitary breakfast when she spotted him sitting calmly in the lobby, reading a newspaper as if their meeting was entirely coincidental. The sight of him made her stomach clench with a mixture of fear and anger. "Dr. Dunn," he said pleasantly, folding his newspaper and rising from his chair. "What a pleasant surprise running into you here." "Cut the act, Marcus," Kara replied, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. "I know who you really are." His expression shifted subtly, the careful mask of a trauma patient falling away to reveal something far more calculating. "I think we should talk," he said, gesturing toward a quiet seating area away from the main lobby traffic. "There are some things you need to understand about your situation." Despite every instinct screaming at her to run, Kara followed him to the secluded corner. She needed to know how much the conspirators knew about her investigation, and Marcus represented her only direct connection to the people running Project Canine Bridge. "You've been busy," Marcus continued as they settled into facing chairs. "Breaking encryption, copying classified files, sharing information with unauthorized individuals. That constitutes multiple federal felonies, you understand. And you've been manipulating innocent people through their beloved pets," Kara replied. "That constitutes something far worse than any legal violation." Marcus smiled, but there was no warmth in the expression. "You still don't understand the scope of what you've stumbled into, do you? This isn't some rogue operation that got out of hand. Project Canine Bridge has full authorization and oversight from the highest levels of national security infrastructure." He reached into his jacket and withdrew a manila folder, placing it on the small table between them. "Before you continue with your misguided crusade, you should know the truth about your involvement in the program." "What truth?" Kara asked, though she was already dreading the answer. "The truth about Milo," Marcus said, opening the folder to reveal documents she had never seen before. "The truth about why you were selected. The truth about how long you've been participating in this program." The first document was a detailed adoption record, but not the simple form she remembered signing at the animal shelter. This was a comprehensive placement agreement that included her psychological profile, her living situation, her work schedule, even her preferred walking routes around the neighborhood. "This is impossible," Kara whispered, studying the document's date. "This was prepared 6 months before I even decided to adopt a pet." "Your decision to adopt wasn't spontaneous," Marcus explained with clinical detachment. "You were guided toward that choice through a series of carefully orchestrated influences. The divorce support group where multiple participants shared positive experiences with pet ownership. The therapy conference where you attended sessions on animal-assisted intervention. Even the magazine article about rescue animals that you found so compelling, all of it was designed to lead you to that animal shelter on that specific Saturday." The revelation hit her like a physical blow. Every moment of her relationship with Milo, every decision that had led to their life together, had been artificially induced by psychological manipulation. The adoption itself was pure theater, Marcus continued, producing additional documents. "Lisa Chun isn't a volunteer. She's a program specialist with advanced training in behavioral psychology. Her job was to ensure that you selected the specific animal we had prepared for you." The second document showed Milo's real background. He hadn't been found wandering along a highway. He had been bred and raised in a specialized facility from birth. Every aspect of his temperament, his behavioral patterns, even his physical characteristics had been designed to appeal to someone with Kara's specific psychological profile. "We call them designer companions," Marcus explained. "Animals bred and trained specifically for placement with predetermined targets." Milo spent his first 3 years in conditioning programs designed to make him irresistible to a trauma therapist dealing with post-divorce emotional adjustment. The cruelty of the deception was staggering. The unconditional love she had believed she shared with Milo, the comfort his presence had provided during difficult times, the sense of purpose that caring for him had given her, all of it had been artificially manufactured. "But the implants," Kara said weakly. "You were monitoring us through the implants." "The implants were just the final phase," Marcus replied. "We had been monitoring your psychological development for 3 years before the technological component was introduced. The devices allowed us to fine-tune Milo's behavioral responses and collect more detailed physiological data, but the fundamental manipulation was already complete." He showed her a timeline documenting her involvement in the program, her therapeutic insights, her treatment approaches with clients, her professional relationships, even her personal emotional development. Everything had been observed, recorded, and influenced through her relationship with Milo. "Your breakthrough with Mrs. Henderson's grief therapy? That was guided by programming Milo to exhibit specific behaviors that put you in the optimal emotional state for empathetic response," Marcus explained. "Your decision to specialize in trauma therapy for first responders, we influenced that by having Milo react positively to certain case files while showing stress responses to others. The violation went deeper than surveillance or privacy invasion. They had corrupted her professional judgment, potentially compromising her ability to help the people who trusted her with their healing. Clients who might have received different treatment, therapeutic insights that might have been artificially induced, professional decisions that had been subtly manipulated. The full scope of the damage was impossible to calculate. "Why?" Kara asked, her voice barely audible. "Why target therapists and healthcare workers?" "Information," Marcus replied simply. "People in your profession have access to the most intimate details of human psychology and behavior. Your clients share things with you that they tell no one else, family secrets, financial pressures, relationship problems, career concerns, political beliefs. That information has enormous intelligence value." He explained that the program had identified mental health professionals as uniquely valuable assets for intelligence gathering. By monitoring and influencing therapists, the conspirators could gain access to detailed psychological profiles of hundreds of individuals without directly targeting them. Your client base includes police officers, teachers, government employees, business executives, and community leaders, Marcus continued. Through your sessions with them, we've gathered intelligence on everything from departmental politics to family vulnerabilities to individual psychological pressure points. The realization that her clients had been unknowingly exposed to surveillance through their therapy sessions filled Kara with a rage that threatened to overwhelm her capacity for rational thought. These people had sought help for their most painful experiences, trusting her to provide a safe space for healing. Instead, their vulnerabilities had been cataloged and exploited. "There's more you need to understand," Marcus said, producing the final document from his folder. "Jennifer Hayes isn't the ally you think she is." The document was a personnel file identifying Jennifer as Dr. Jennifer Hayes, Program Coordinator for Subject Management and Information Control. Her role wasn't that of a whistleblower trying to expose the program. She was a specialist in managing subjects who discovered their involvement in the operation. Jennifer's job is to control the narrative when subjects like you become aware of the program, Marcus explained. She provides you with carefully selected information that makes you feel empowered, while actually keeping you within parameters we can manage. Even Jennifer's emotional story about her daughter dying in early program experiments was fabricated. The USB drive she had provided contained real Project Canine Bridge documentation, but it was information the program's directors were willing to sacrifice to maintain control over Kara's investigation. Everything you think you've discovered, every step you believe you've taken toward exposing this conspiracy, has been orchestrated to serve our purposes, Marcus said with devastating finality. You're not investigating Project Canine Bridge. You're part of it. The complete destruction of her sense of reality was overwhelming. Every relationship, every decision, every moment of agency she thought she had exercised in the past 3 years had been artificially constructed. She wasn't a victim who had accidentally discovered a conspiracy. She was a test subject whose reactions were being studied and managed. "What do you want from me?" Kara asked, her voice hollow with defeat. "Cooperation," Marcus replied. "Continue your therapy practice. Continue your relationship with Milo. Continue living your life exactly as you have been, but with the understanding that you're serving a larger purpose. And if I refuse?" Marcus's expression grew cold. "Then you'll discover that the program has contingencies for subjects who can't be successfully managed through conventional means." As he rose to leave, placing the folder back in his jacket, Marcus delivered his final blow. "Dr. Dunn, you need to understand that there is no escape from Project Canine Bridge. We selected you because your psychological profile indicated you would be particularly responsive to this type of manipulation. Everything about your life, your career choice, your relationship patterns, your emotional vulnerabilities made you perfect for our purposes. We own you," he said simply. "We always have." The hotel lobby seemed to spin around Kara as the full implications of Marcus's revelation settled into her consciousness. Her entire adult life had been a carefully constructed illusion. Designed to serve the intelligence-gathering needs of a conspiracy she was only beginning to understand. But as the initial shock began to fade, something else emerged in its place, a determination born of complete desperation. If every aspect of her life had been artificially constructed, then she had nothing left to lose by destroying the system that had created that illusion. The quiet therapist who had built her identity around helping others heal was about to discover what she was capable of when every boundary of civilized behavior had been stripped away. The drive back to her hometown felt like traveling through a landscape that had fundamentally changed while appearing exactly the same. Every familiar building, every street corner where she had walked with Milo, every landmark of her peaceful life now seemed like props in an elaborate stage, production designed to maintain her illusion of normalcy. Kara's mind raced through the implications of what Marcus had revealed. If Project Canine Bridge was as extensive as the evidence suggested, and if her own experience was representative rather than unique, then hundreds of professionals across the country were unknowingly serving as intelligence assets for a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of government. The scope of the violation was staggering, but so was the opportunity it represented. The program's very size and complexity made it vulnerable to exposure if the right evidence could be presented to the right people in the right way. Marcus's confidence that she was completely controlled might be his greatest mistake. She needed to understand the full operational structure of Project Canine Bridge before taking any action that couldn't be undone. The technical documentation Jennifer had provided was extensive, but it represented only a portion of the program's activities. To effectively expose the conspiracy, she would need access to the central control systems that coordinated operations across multiple states. The revelation about the master control device, buried deep in the technical specifications, had initially seemed like just another component of the sophisticated surveillance network. But as Kara studied the schematics more carefully, she realized it represented something far more significant, the single point of vulnerability that could bring down the entire program. The device wasn't just a monitoring station. It was the central coordination system that managed all implanted animals simultaneously. Through it, program operators could activate behavioral modification protocols, adjust surveillance parameters, and coordinate collective influence operations across hundreds of subjects at once. More importantly, the system contained complete records of every operation, every subject, every violation the program had committed since its inception. If she could access those records and transmit them to the public, the evidence would be too comprehensive and detailed for any suppression effort to contain. But the master control device was housed in the primary research facility, a converted industrial complex outside the city that appeared from public records to be a veterinary research center affiliated with the state university. Getting inside would require more than investigative skills and moral outrage. It would require careful planning and probably illegal entry into a secured government facility. As she sat in her car outside her own house, a place that no longer felt like home, Kara realized she was contemplating actions that would transform her from victim to fugitive in the eyes of federal law enforcement. Breaking into a classified research facility, stealing government data, and exposing national security operations would make her a target for prosecution under multiple federal statutes. The old Kara, the cautious therapist who had built her life around helping others within established legal and ethical boundaries, would never have considered such drastic action. That person had been built on illusions that were now completely shattered. The new Kara, who understood that her entire adult life had been artificially constructed, felt liberated from conventional constraints. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Jennifer. Need to meet urgently. Situation has changed. Usual place, 8 p.m. Even knowing that Jennifer was a program operative rather than an ally, Kara decided to keep the appointment. Understanding the program's next moves might be crucial to planning her own response. Besides, she had advantages now that Marcus probably didn't realize. She knew Jennifer's real role, and she had information about the master control device that might not be common knowledge among lower-level operatives. The restaurant where they had first met felt different now. Instead of a safe space for sharing classified information, it seemed like enemy territory where every conversation was probably monitored and every gesture analyzed for intelligence value. But Kara needed to understand what the program expected from her before she could effectively subvert those expectations. Jennifer arrived precisely on time, her manner suggesting urgency mixed with professional concern. "Kara, I'm glad you came," she said as they settled into the same corner table they had occupied before. "There have been some developments that affect your safety." "What kind of developments?" Kara asked, playing her role as the confused subject who still believed Jennifer was helping her. "Marcus Webb has been reassigned to direct oversight of your case," Jennifer replied, her expression conveying what appeared to be genuine worry. "That means the program considers you a high-priority threat requiring specialized management." "What does that mean practically?" Kara pressed, curious about how much Jennifer would reveal about program operations. "It means your freedom of movement will be severely restricted," Jennifer explained. "Constant surveillance, controlled social interactions, possibly even relocation to a more secure environment where your activities can be better managed." As Jennifer spoke, Kara realized she was being offered what amounted to the program's final attempt at voluntary cooperation. The illusion of choice: submit to total control or face consequences that would eliminate her ability to resist. "There is one alternative," Jennifer continued, lowering her voice and leaning across the table. "If you're willing to work with us actively rather than just passively, the program might be willing to offer you a different kind of arrangement." "What do you mean by work with us actively?" "Use your position as a therapist to gather specific intelligence on targeted individuals," Jennifer replied. "Instead of just monitoring your general practice, we would provide you with particular clients whose information we need, and you would report their psychological vulnerabilities and behavioral patterns directly to program coordinators." The proposal was simultaneously appalling and illuminating. It confirmed that the program was actively recruiting therapists as conscious collaborators rather than just unwitting subjects. How many of her colleagues had already accepted similar arrangements? How much of the mental health infrastructure had been compromised by people who had chosen cooperation over resistance? "I need time to think about this," Kara said, maintaining her facade of uncertainty while actually buying time to finalize her own plans. "Of course," Jennifer replied, "but not too much time. Marcus will expect an answer within 48 hours." As they concluded their meeting and prepared to leave separately, Jennifer offered one final piece of information that changed everything. "Kara, you should know that the program is preparing for a major expansion. Within 6 months, we expect to have monitoring capabilities in place for over 10,000 subjects across all 50 states. The scale of the planned expansion made Kara's decision for her. This wasn't just about her own violated privacy or even the rights of current subjects. Project Canine Bridge was preparing to become a mass surveillance program that could monitor and manipulate tens of thousands of American citizens through their beloved pets. The research facility that housed the master control device suddenly became more than just a source of evidence. It was the command center for an operation that threatened the psychological autonomy of an entire generation of pet owners. Destroying that facility wouldn't just expose the conspiracy. It would cripple its ability to expand. That night, Kara made her final preparations with the methodical attention to detail that 20 years of therapeutic practice had instilled in her. She researched the facility's layout using public architectural records, studied security protocols for similar government installations, and identified the optimal approach routes using satellite imagery. The break-in would need to accomplish multiple objectives simultaneously. She had to access the master control device to download comprehensive program records, locate the emergency broadcast override system that could transmit her evidence to the public, and document the facility's operations in sufficient detail to prevent future cover-up efforts. Most importantly, she had to find a way to disable the implant control systems permanently. The technical documentation suggested that destroying the central coordination infrastructure would render all existing implants inert, freeing hundreds of animals and their owners from continued manipulation. As she prepared to leave her house for what would probably be the last time, Kara looked around at the life she had thought was hers: the comfortable furniture, the carefully organized office space, the photographs documenting what she had believed were genuine relationships. All of it felt like museum exhibits from someone else's existence. Milo watched her preparations with the alert intelligence that had become more apparent since his implants were removed. Without the technological influence that had shaped his behavior for 3 years, he seemed more genuinely responsive to her emotional state. The irony wasn't lost on her that their relationship was becoming more authentic, just as she was about to risk everything to expose the system that had brought them together. "I'm going to try to make this right," she told him quietly as she gathered her final supplies. "For you, for all the other animals, for all the people who trusted someone like me to help them heal." The drive to the research facility took 45 minutes through increasingly rural landscape. As urban development gave way to farmland and forest, Kara felt her determination crystallizing into something that transcended fear or uncertainty. She was no longer fighting just for her own freedom. She was fighting for the principle that human beings deserved authentic relationships, genuine emotions, and the right to private thoughts. The facility appeared exactly as the architectural records had indicated, a cluster of modern buildings designed to look like a typical veterinary research campus. But the sophisticated security infrastructure visible even from the public road confirmed that this was far more than an academic institution. As she parked in a wooded area half a mile from the main entrance, Kara realized she was crossing a line that would change her life irrevocably. Within a few hours, she would either expose one of the most extensive privacy violations in American history, or she would disappear into whatever legal or extra-legal mechanisms the program used to eliminate persistent threats. The quiet therapist, who had stumbled onto this conspiracy by accident, was about to attempt something that would require courage she wasn't sure she possessed. But the alternative, allowing Project Canine Bridge to expand its operations to tens of thousands of additional victims, was unacceptable. As she gathered her equipment and began the careful approach to the facility, Kara thought about all the people whose lives had been violated by this program, the pet owners who believed they were experiencing genuine love, the clients who thought they were receiving uncompromised therapeutic care, the animals who had been bred and conditioned to serve as unwitting instruments of surveillance. All of them deserved better than the deception that had defined their relationships. The facility's perimeter was secured with motion sensors and cameras, but the wooded approach she had identified from satellite imagery offered concealment until she reached the outer fence line. The security measures were sophisticated, but not impenetrable, designed more to deter casual intruders than to stop someone with detailed knowledge of the layout and specific objectives. As she cut through the chain-link fence using bolt cutters she had purchased that afternoon, Kara reflected on the transformation that had brought her to this moment. 3 weeks ago, she had been a respected therapist, living a quiet, predictable life with her beloved dog. Now she was breaking into a federal facility to expose a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of government. The irony was that Project Canine Bridge had created its own greatest threat by selecting her for the program. Her training in reading human behavior, her experience in uncovering hidden trauma, her methodical approach to gathering and analyzing information, all the skills that had made her valuable as an unwitting intelligence asset were now being turned against the system that had sought to exploit them. The main research building was larger than it appeared from the exterior, with multiple levels extending underground. According to the architectural plans, the Master Control Center was located in the basement level, protected by additional security barriers, but accessible through maintenance corridors that connected to the surface structures. Moving through the darkened facility required careful navigation around security cameras and motion detectors, but Kara's weeks of studying the layout paid off. She reached the basement level without triggering any obvious alarms, though she knew that sophisticated facilities often had silent monitoring systems that could track intruders without alerting them to detection. The Master Control Center exceeded even her expectations based on the technical documentation. Banks of monitors displayed real-time data from hundreds of implanted animals across multiple states. Workstations showed detailed behavioral analysis, psychological profiles of human subjects, and coordination protocols for collective influence operations. Most disturbing were the screens, showing live feeds from what appeared to be therapy sessions, veterinary appointments, and private moments in subjects' homes. The scope of the surveillance was breathtaking. Thousands of hours of the most intimate aspects of people's lives, recorded and analyzed without their knowledge or consent. But the center also contained exactly what Kara had hoped to find: comprehensive records of every aspect of Project Canine Bridge's operations, subject files, operational protocols, budget allocations, personnel records, and detailed documentation of every privacy violation the program had committed since its inception. The emergency broadcast override system was located in an adjacent communications center, designed to allow program operators to take control of local television and radio networks for what the documentation euphemistically called information management operations. The system could interrupt regular programming across multiple metropolitan areas simultaneously, broadcasting whatever content the operators deemed necessary. As Kara began downloading the program records and preparing the broadcast equipment, she discovered something that made her pause. The facility contained dozens of animals in various stages of the implantation process, housed in a veterinary section that looked exactly like a legitimate research laboratory. The animals appeared healthy and well cared for, but they were essentially prisoners in a system that would use them to violate their future owners' privacy and autonomy. Some were still puppies and kittens, being conditioned from birth to serve as surveillance platforms. Others were adult animals undergoing the surgical procedures that would transform them into technological instruments. Looking at them, Kara realized that exposing the program wasn't enough. These animals deserved freedom from the system that had created them for exploitation. The master control device that coordinated their implants had to be destroyed to ensure they could live authentic lives with whatever families eventually adopted them. The technical specifications she had studied indicated that destroying the central coordination system would render all existing implants inert. The devices would become harmless foreign objects that could be safely removed by veterinarians, rather than active surveillance equipment transmitting private information to government monitors. As she worked to prepare both the evidence broadcast and the system destruction, Kara heard sounds that indicated her presence had been detected. Security personnel were beginning systematic searches of the facility, working their way methodically through each floor and section. The next few minutes would determine whether her desperate gamble would succeed, or whether she would join the ranks of whistleblowers who had disappeared into whatever legal or extra-legal mechanisms the program used to silence persistent threats. But for the first time since discovering the truth about her life, Kara felt genuine hope. She had gathered evidence that could expose every aspect of Project Canine Bridge's operations. She had access to communication systems that could broadcast that evidence to millions of people simultaneously. And she had located the central control infrastructure that could free hundreds of animals and their owners from continued manipulation. The woman who had spent her career helping others heal was about to discover whether she could heal an entire system corrupted by deception and surveillance. The stakes couldn't be higher, but neither could her determination to restore authenticity to relationships that had been poisoned by technological manipulation disguised as love. The sound of footsteps in the corridor above made Kara's hands move faster across the control center keyboards. She had successfully accessed the master database and begun transferring thousands of classified files to the broadcast system. But the download progress bar showed she still needed at least 10 more minutes to complete the evidence compilation. Security voices echoed through the facility's communication system as teams coordinated their search patterns. Section A clear, moving to Section B. No signs of intrusion on the main level. Basement sweep commencing in 5 minutes. Kara's fingers flew across the emergency broadcast override controls, following the technical procedures she had memorized from Jennifer's documentation. The system was designed for rapid deployment during crisis situations, and she prayed that speed would work in her favor now. The first challenge was accessing the broadcast. Authentication codes needed to take control of regional television and radio networks. The codes changed daily and were stored in a secure partition of the master control system. But Kara's weeks of studying the technical specifications had revealed a backdoor protocol designed for emergency access. As she worked through the authentication sequence, movement sensors in the basement corridor began flashing red warnings on the security monitor. The search teams had reached her level and were systematically clearing each room. She had perhaps 5 minutes before they reached the control center. The emergency broadcast system finally responded to her commands, displaying a map of regional communication networks that could be commandeered for her transmission. Dozens of television stations, radio networks, and cable systems appeared as potential targets for the evidence broadcast. But as she began uploading the Project K9 bridge files to the transmission queue, the control center door burst open and Marcus Webb entered with 3 security operatives in tactical gear. "Step away from the controls, Dr. Dunn," Marcus said calmly, though his weapon was drawn and trained on her. "This facility is under federal jurisdiction. You're committing multiple felonies by being here. I'm exposing multiple felonies that have already been committed," Kara replied, continuing to work at the broadcast controls despite the weapons pointed at her. "Thousands of people have the right to know their privacy has been violated. You have no idea what you're dealing with," Marcus said, moving closer. "This program has congressional oversight and judicial authorization. Everything we've done is completely legal under national security provisions." "Legal doesn't make it right," Kara said, initiating the emergency broadcast sequence. "And I doubt Congress authorized you to manipulate therapy sessions and violate doctor-patient confidentiality." The broadcast system began its takeover of regional networks, but Marcus was close enough now to reach the controls. As he lunged forward to stop the transmission, Kara made a desperate decision that surprised even her. Instead of trying to evade him, she grabbed the master control device that coordinated all the animal implants and yanked it from its housing, with enough force to sever the connection cables. Sparks flew as sophisticated electronics worth millions of dollars were irreparably damaged. "Every implant and every animal just went dead," she announced as alarms throughout the facility began wailing. "Hundreds of pets are free from your surveillance right now." Marcus's face went pale as he realized the implications. "Do you have any idea what you've just done? That system took 5 years to develop and deploy. You've destroyed a national security asset worth hundreds of millions of dollars. I freed innocent animals from being used as surveillance equipment against their own families, Kara replied firmly. And I've given their owners back the privacy they never knew they had lost. The broadcast transmission was now running automatically, uploading compressed files containing Project Canine Bridge documentation to every television and radio station within a 300-mile radius. Even if Marcus regained control of the facility, stopping the transmission would require coordinated action by multiple network operators, a process that could take hours. The evidence is already in the pipeline, Kara said as Marcus frantically worked to abort the broadcast. Within the next hour, millions of people are going to learn about Project Canine Bridge, your illegal surveillance operations, and the violation of constitutional rights that you've been conducting for years. Security operatives moved to physically restrain her, but the damage was already done. The emergency broadcast system was designed to be unstoppable once initiated, a safeguard to ensure that critical information could reach the public even if communication centers were compromised. As Marcus realized that his efforts to stop the transmission were futile, his expression shifted from professional calm to something much darker. "You have no idea what you've just unleashed," he said grimly. "This program exists because there are threats to national security that require monitoring. People who never voluntarily cooperate with intelligence gathering. Then convince them to cooperate voluntarily," Kara replied. "Don't trick them into it by manipulating their relationships with animals they love." The wailing alarms throughout the facility signaled more than just a security breach. As the master control system went offline, automated protocols began shutting down experimental operations to prevent contamination of ongoing research. In the veterinary section, technicians were scrambling to manage animals whose implants had suddenly gone inert. Marcus grabbed Kara roughly and forced her toward the exit. "You're coming with us," he said. "There are going to be consequences for what you've done here." But as they reached the corridor, both of them could hear something that changed the entire dynamic of the situation. Television broadcasts were beginning throughout the facility as the emergency override system completed its network takeover. A professional news anchor's voice echoed through the building's communication system. "We interrupt regular programming to bring you breaking news about a massive government surveillance program that has been operating without public knowledge for several years." The evidence broadcast had begun, and there was no way to stop it. The television screens throughout the facility displayed an unprecedented emergency broadcast that would change American politics forever. Kara's carefully compiled evidence was being presented with the gravity and professionalism of a major news event, complete with official documentation, technical schematics, and testimonials from program insiders. "Good evening. This is an emergency broadcast regarding Project Canine Bridge, a classified government surveillance program that has been monitoring American citizens through implanted devices in their pets." The automated presentation began, using synthesized voice technology to narrate the devastating evidence. Marcus and his security team watched in horrified fascination as years of classified operations were exposed in methodical detail. The broadcast included the technical specifications Kara had discovered, video footage from the facility's own surveillance systems, and comprehensive lists of affected individuals across multiple states. The program has violated the constitutional rights of hundreds of Americans by conducting surveillance without warrants, manipulating therapeutic relationships, and using beloved pets as unwitting instruments of government monitoring. The broadcast continued. What made the revelation particularly damaging was the quality and comprehensiveness of the evidence. This wasn't speculation or conspiracy theory. It was documentation from the program's own files, presented with enough technical detail to be verified by independent experts. Kara watched Marcus's expression as he realized the full scope of what she had accomplished. The broadcast wasn't just exposing Project Canine Bridge. and was providing sufficient evidence for congressional investigations, federal prosecutions, and class action lawsuits that would destroy the careers of everyone involved. Dr. Dunn, you need to understand that this broadcast represents a national security disaster, Marcus said desperately. The intelligence gathering we've conducted has prevented terrorist attacks, identified foreign agents, and protected American lives. Show me the evidence, Kara replied. Show me one documented case where this program prevented anything more serious than embarrassing publicity for the people running it. The broadcast was now displaying specific case studies, including Kara's own experience with manipulated therapy sessions and clients whose information had been gathered without their knowledge. The violation of doctor-patient confidentiality alone would trigger investigations by multiple professional licensing boards. As the evidence presentation continued, Marcus received urgent communications from his superiors. The broadcast was reaching millions of viewers across multiple states, and social media was exploding with reactions from pet owners who were beginning to understand that their animals might have been used for surveillance. The master control system you destroyed coordinated behavioral modification for over 800 animals, Marcus said, his professional composure finally cracking. Without that system, we have no way to manage subjects who might experience psychological distress from sudden changes in their pet's behavior. You mean without that system, those animals can finally act like themselves instead of like the surveillance equipment you turn them into? Kara replied. The broadcast was now showing the live laboratory footage she had discovered, documenting the breeding and conditioning programs that created designer companions for placement with specific targets. The images of puppies and kittens being surgically implanted with monitoring devices were particularly devastating to public opinion. Marcus's radio crackled with increasingly frantic communications from program headquarters. All network override attempts have failed. The broadcast is being carried by emergency alert systems across 12 states. Congressional leadership is demanding immediate briefings. Repeat, congressional leadership is demanding immediate briefings, the voice continued. Program shutdown protocols are being initiated. All field operations are to cease immediately. The admission that shutdown protocols existed was perhaps the most telling revelation of all. Project Canine Bridge had been designed with mechanisms for rapid termination if exposure became unavoidable, indicating that the program's architects had always known their activities were legally and ethically indefensible. As sirens approached the facility from multiple directions, Marcus made one final attempt to salvage the situation. Dr. Dunn, if you cooperate with the shutdown process and provide statements supporting the program's national security rationale, we might be able to limit the legal consequences you're facing. The only statement I'm going to make is to congressional investigators and federal prosecutors, Kara replied. This program violated the constitutional rights of hundreds of innocent people, and everyone responsible needs to be held accountable. The emergency broadcast was now in its final phase, providing contact information for affected individuals to report their experiences and seek legal assistance. Pet owners across the region were being advised to have their animals examined for possible implants, and veterinarians were being given technical information for safe removal procedures. This concludes the emergency broadcast regarding Project Canine Bridge, the automated presentation announced. Complete documentation of this program has been transmitted to congressional oversight committees, federal prosecutors, and major news organizations for further investigation. As the regular programming resumed on the facility's television screens, both Kara and Marcus understood that the world had changed irrevocably in the past hour. The surveillance program that had operated in secrecy for years was now public. Knowledge, documented with evidence too comprehensive to deny or suppress. Federal vehicles surrounded the facility as law enforcement agencies responded to what was already being characterized as one of the most significant domestic surveillance scandals in American history. But for Kara, The satisfaction of exposing the conspiracy was secondary to knowing that hundreds of animals and their human companions were finally free from manipulation they had never consented to endure. The quiet therapist who had stumbled onto this conspiracy had successfully destroyed it, but the consequences of that success were only beginning to unfold. 6 months after the Project Canine Bridge revelation, Kara sat in a congressional hearing room that had become as familiar as her former therapy office. The Senate Intelligence Committee's investigation had been exhaustive, bringing together constitutional law experts, technology specialists, and affected citizens to examine every aspect of the surveillance program. Dr. Dunn, in your professional opinion, what long-term psychological impacts have you observed in individuals who discovered their relationships with their pets had been technologically manipulated? Senator Williams asked from the committee table. The violation goes to the very core of human trust, Kara replied, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had lived through the experience, while maintaining her professional perspective. When people learn that their most intimate emotional bonds were artificially constructed, it creates a form of trauma that affects their ability to form authentic relationships going forward. The hearing room was packed with representatives from advocacy organizations, legal teams preparing class action lawsuits, and journalists documenting what had become known as the largest domestic surveillance scandal in decades. But for Kara, the most meaningful presence was the gallery of pet owners who had discovered their animals had been part of the program. Dr. Martinez sat in the front row, his veterinary license restored after investigators determined his cooperation with program authorities had been coerced through threats to his family. His documentation of affected animals had proved crucial to the congressional investigation, and his willingness to testify had helped expose the program's systematic infiltration of veterinary practices. The investigation had revealed that Project Canine Bridge had monitored over 1,200 individuals across 15 states, gathering intelligence on everyone from government employees to community leaders to healthcare workers like Kara. The constitutional violations were so extensive that federal prosecutors were pursuing criminal charges against 17 program administrators and contractors. Marcus Webb, whose real name turned out to be Dr. Marcus Chen, was facing multiple federal felonies for his role in coordinating surveillance operations. The revelation that he held advanced degrees in both psychology and electronic engineering had explained his effectiveness in managing subjects who discovered their involvement in the program. Dr. Dunn, you've established a new practice specializing in helping Project Canine Bridge survivors, Senator Williams continued. Can you describe the therapeutic challenges these individuals face? The fundamental issue is rebuilding the capacity for authentic emotional connection, Kara explained. When someone learns that their most trusted relationship was technologically manipulated, they begin questioning every emotion, every instinct, every moment of joy or comfort they experienced. The healing process requires helping them distinguish between artificial influences and genuine feelings. Her new practice, housed in a converted farmhouse outside the city, had become a haven for people trying to reconstruct their sense of reality after discovering their participation in the surveillance program. The therapeutic approach she had developed focused on helping clients separate authentic memories from artificially induced experiences. The most challenging cases involved parents whose children had formed bonds with implanted animals, explaining to a 10-year-old that their beloved dog had been used to monitor. Their family required a delicate balance of honesty and emotional support that pushed the boundaries of traditional therapy. But there had been remarkable success stories as well. Pet owners who had been freed from implant monitoring reported that their relationships with their animals had become deeper and more authentic once the technological manipulation was removed. Animals whose implants had been safely extracted showed improved health and more natural behavioral patterns. Milo had been among the first animals to undergo the removal procedure, developed by a team of veterinary specialists working with congressional investigators. The surgery had been successful, and his recovery had exceeded all expectations. Without the artificial influences that had shaped his behavior for 3 years, he had developed a personality that was more independent, but somehow more genuinely affectionate. Senator Williams, I'd like to address the committee's question about preventing similar programs in the future, Kara said, turning to face the panel directly. The most important safeguard is transparency in research involving animals and human subjects. Project Canine Bridge was able to operate in secrecy because it exploited gaps in oversight between different regulatory agencies. The legislative response to the scandal had been swift and comprehensive. New laws required explicit consent for any research involving surveillance of human subjects, even through intermediary methods like pet monitoring. Veterinary practices were now required to report any unusual medical procedures or devices discovered in animals to state oversight boards. Professional licensing boards had established new ethical guidelines for therapists, social workers, and healthcare providers who might be targeted for intelligence gathering through their access to confidential client information. The violation of therapeutic relationships had prompted fundamental changes in how mental health professionals understood their obligations to protect client privacy. Dr. Dunn, do you believe the constitutional protections we've established are sufficient to prevent future surveillance programs like Project Canine Bridge? Asked Senator Rodriguez, the committee's ranking minority member. Laws and regulations are important, but the most effective protection is public awareness, Kara replied. Citizens who understand how their privacy can be violated through seemingly innocent means are better equipped to recognize and resist such violations. The greatest weakness of Project Canine Bridge was that it depended on people not knowing what to look for. As the hearing concluded, Kara reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The quiet therapist who had discovered strange holes in her dog's back had become a nationally recognized expert on surveillance technology and privacy rights. The violation that had shattered her peaceful life had ultimately led to protections that would safeguard thousands of other families. The personal cost had been significant. Her former life was irretrievably gone, along with the comfortable illusions that had made it possible. But the new life she had built was grounded in authentic relationships and genuine purpose in ways that her old existence had never been. Walking out of the Capitol building with Milo at her side, Kara felt something she hadn't experienced since before discovering the implants. Complete confidence that her emotional responses were entirely her own. The love she felt for her companion, the satisfaction she derived from her work, the hope she maintained for the future, all of it was real in ways that her previous happiness had never been. The fight to expose Project Canine Bridge had taught her that authentic relationships required constant vigilance to protect them from those who would exploit human emotions for their own purposes. But it had also shown her that such vigilance was not only possible, but essential for preserving the bonds that made life meaningful. As they walked toward their car in the late afternoon sunlight, Kara realized that she and Milo were finally experiencing what they had always believed they shared, a relationship built on genuine affection, mutual respect, and the kind of unconditional trust that no technology could ever replicate or replace. The quiet therapist had found her voice, and in doing so, had helped an entire nation rediscover the value of authentic human connection.